Yeah. So, namaste. Good afternoon and swadika, the esteemed guests and attendees. Welcome to Hindu Media Conference at World Hindu Congress 2023, Bangkok. I would like to introduce Shri Vikram Sharma, who is a coordinator, Hindu Media Conference. Vikram Sharma is the editor of Hindu Post, a news and opinion digital media outlet that provides the correct perspective on issues concerning Hindu society. A former IT professional with 15 years of software industry experience in Bharat and in USA, Vikram volunteered as a community organizer with other Swayamsevaks before 2014 Lok Sabha elections. Later, he left his corporate job to dedicate himself to the Hindu civilizational cause by launching Hindu Post with Swami Vigyanand's blessings and guidance. I now invite Shri Vikram Sharma to kindly give his introductory remarks. Thank you.
Namaste and a very warm welcome to all the distinguished speakers and delegates to the Hindu Media Conference, which is being conducted by the Hindu Media Forum at the World Hindu Congress 2023, Bangkok. I hope everyone had a good lunch, but not too good. Any drowsiness you may be feeling should be dispelled by the power-packed lineup of speakers we have, not just for the coming session, but for all the 6 sessions over the next 2 days. Battery might be low. Now, I've been asked to speak about the importance of media and its impact on society, and to explain the purpose behind the Hindu Media Forum and why the media conference is one of the 7 conferences being organized at the World Hindu Congress. So, there are so many media experts here that this is almost like asking somebody to deliver a lecture on basic yoga to advanced yogis. But I'll still go ahead, because it's important to remember that the wider Hindu Samaj, including many well-qualified, high-achieving professionals, they also have a bit of a blind side when it comes to understanding how media can manipulate our minds, how it can change our perceptions, and subtly push an agenda. So let me get started with the job at hand. Media matters. Historically, too, we have seen that whoever is powerful, he tries to control the flow of information and the means of communication. So media being considered one of the most potent forces shaping society is nothing new. But modern media can be said to have started with the advent of newspapers. Now we remember in the pre-independence era, how the Britishers tried to censor any paper with a nationalist viewpoint. After independence too, that pattern continued. The governments tried to censor information, especially during the emergency era. Then we moved into the world of TV news. Initially, there was only a public broadcaster. Late 80s, early 90s saw a boom of private TV channels. Yet, even with the variety of TV channels on offer, the narrative that was being set was still controlled by a group of Nehruvian left liberal elites. And so basically the latent Hinduphobia in media has always been present. TV did nothing to change that. Now we move forward to the late 2000s. That is when the first serious challenge to the mainstream narrative that a certain group of people exercised, that came in the form of, with the advent of the internet, and that democratized the discourse. Now, ordinary people with analytical skills, with critical thinking ability, could go online, could express themselves, and they could challenge the so-called experts. Today, we are standing at another inflection point at the dawn of the AI age, and the power of media has increased manifold. So with AI and especially generative AI coming into the mix with deep fakes and other things, a well-crafted strategy to wage an info war against a nation can have a crippling effect and demoralize the citizenry without even a shot being fired. And we have seen that multiple times over the last few years, during the farmers' protest, during CAA, even in foreign countries, overseas. Information warfare is real and it's here to stay. Unfortunately, Hindus have largely ignored this critical area as a community. As individuals, yes, we are present in media. We also are there in decision-making roles. But as a community, we fail to form a coherent worldview and ensure that our interests are safeguarded. And this is not just in media, but other important areas like education and politics as well. So as a result, anti-Hindu attitudes have become deeply entrenched. And self-loathing is rampant amongst some young Hindus with fancy degrees. And Hinduphobia is rearing its ugly head all over the world, as we have seen, whether it's Canada, USA, within Bharat. I mean, Bharat is one of the biggest sources of Hinduphobia. Now, next, I would like to just talk about the two main verticals in which we can categorize media, which is news media and entertainment media. So news media is ideally supposed to be the fourth pillar of democracy, but only if it does its job diligently and without bias. Actually speaking truth to power. But the reality is that due to the hypocrisy and arrogance of a global liberal elite who control the mainstream media architecture all over the world, this mainstream media is facing a crisis of credibility all over. Terms like paid media have become common. Instead of reflecting reality, the press and media actively filter and shape it. The selective focus on certain issues and complete apathy towards others leads the public to perceive some issues as more important than others. So if you do a simple thought experiment, you just look at the front page of any big newspaper in Bharat over a period of 1 month, and you just categorize the kind of news which become front page, which are reduced to small columns in the inside pages. You will get an idea of what kind of agenda is being set and peddled. At the same time, entertainment media is arguably even more powerful because it works at a deeper subconscious level. It affects our culture, what we wear, what we eat, what traditions we want to follow, our lifestyles, our aspirations. So being present in entertainment media, ensuring that our representation is correct, is very important. With the rise of digital media, we are now seeing that boundaries are blurring. News, entertainment, it's all merging. There is a new term called infotainment. And like I said, AI is adding more complexity to the mix. So just to delve a little bit more into news media, so this image is a good representation of how media, if it is biased, can distort our perceptions, making the victim the oppressor and the attacker as the victim. And if you look at Bharat, you can see multiple examples. Dangerous cattle smugglers become dairy transporters. Religiously indoctrinated men who groom minor girls, they are projected as interfaith relations battling majoritarian bigotry. Now we are hearing chatter of the impending genocide of India's minorities, while the actual ongoing gradual genocide in Pakistan and Bangladesh is ignored, which is unfolding before our eyes. If we go back just 50 years, the 1971 genocide in Bangladesh, it was censored. It never registered in our public consciousness. Cut to 1990, the Kashmiri Pandit exodus. I was in Mumbai in class 7th at the time. I remember in my school, a couple of Kashmiri Pandit teachers had come. We were just told that they had to come in a hurry, but not why. Neither news covered it, neither our parents discussed it, communities didn't discuss it. And it took a movie 32 years later to actually help the victims process the pain that had been buried deep inside. And a more recent example is the 2021 post-poll violence. I think the correct term is pogrom, a state-sanctioned pogrom, where we saw dozens of lives being claimed within the first month of the election results being announced. 1 lakh people displaced, many to neighboring states like Assam. And a staggering 7,000 women were molested or worse. And I'm not plucking this figure out of thin air. This was the result of a fact-finding team led by a retired Chief Justice of Sikkim High Court and IS/IPS officers. And the way our media has covered this, it's like, they just downplayed the violence. There was some minimal coverage. And it was branded as routine political violence seen in the state. So this shows that even though now we are bringing up these issues more and more, the mainstream media still has a powerful control over the narrative. If we talk about okay, so this is another good representation of how media distorts reality. So this is a recurring pattern which many of us have seen, that visually a Hindu sadhu is represented when a crime is committed by the occult practitioner or black magic practitioner of the person of another faith. So this shows the inherent anti-Hindu prejudice and lack of integrity of many mainstream media outlets. Quickly, let's talk about films. So this is the research done by an IIM Ahmedabad professor. He, I believe, is now in IIM Rohtak. So his team picked 50 Bollywood films per decade from the 60s to the 2010s and analyzed those. So it turned out that 58% of the corrupt politicians had a Brahmin last name, 62% of the corrupt businessmen had a Vaishya last name, 84% of the Muslims in the films were shown as strongly religious and honest, even if they were involved in crime. And what is even more staggering is the Pakistan love that we see in many of our media houses, leading media houses. So 18 of those films had Pakistani characters, and they were projected as welcoming, courteous, open-minded, courageous, the good Maulana who takes care of everybody. Whereas the real Maulana, Mian Mittu, we all know what he does. But the impact is so deep that 94% of the 150 school students who were shown these, who were asked about, the perceptions that were created by the films, they said, yes, this is authentic. Now I'll just play a small clip.
और तेरी कुंडली मेरे हाथ में तब से है जब से तू गेटी गैलेक्सी थिएटर के बाहर टिकट ब्लैक करता था, धारावी झोपड़पट्टी में दारू की भट्टी लगाता था, सहारनपुर रेड लाइट एरिया में लड़कियां सप्लाई करता था, और आज भी तेरी कुंडली मेरे हाथ में, क्योंकि जैसा मैंने कहा था, तुझे कुत्ते की तरह यहां से घसीट के लेके जाऊंगा।
तेरे खाली मस्तक पे दस्तक दे सिंघम, सही गलत का ज्ञान ले।
मैं लेता नहीं, देता हूं।
अब तू दिखा दे राहें सदके तेरे, कर लूं मैं पूरे खुद से जो वारे मेरे, अब तू दिखा दे राहें में सदके तेरी दुआ। साला हिंदुस्तान में जब तक
So I think this clip says all that has to be said about, how Bollywood, sections of Bollywood continue to operate. So now the question is, why Hindu Media Forum? Why do we need a media forum for Hindus? Isn't that communal? So the thing is, Hindus are facing a multi-pronged threat from all sides. So our response has to be equally robust, equally forthright. And it's clear that we must come together. We must come together to safeguard our interests and project the right narrative, both in news media and entertainment media. And I think it's a natural corollary that if the Hindu viewpoint is safeguarded, it will lead to a healthy society where we have mutual respect for diverse cultures and civilizations. Otherwise, we are headed for the clash of civilizations. Okay, so the Hindu Media Forum was formed in 2013 as a platform to advocate for the Hindu viewpoint in both emerging and traditional forms of media, to advocate as an advocacy platform. It mobilizes elements in all the forms of media to provide the correct perspective on issues impacting Hindus. And it also tries to influence the entertainment industry to correct the misperceptions and provide a right picture of Hindu Dharma and Hindu Samaj. Okay, so what have we done till now? So we have organized 3 media conferences in the 2 World Hindu Congress that preceded this one. We have also organized 4 minor conferences just for news and entertainment media in different parts of Bharat. We have launched hindupost.in. It's in Jan 2016. It's a news portal dedicated to promoting or presenting the right picture about Hindus. But there is a long way to go yet. The challenge before us is immense. And yes, there has been some welcome course correction in both news media, entertainment media. But we have to realize that, this is an uphill battle. We are still fighting a guerrilla war against a very well-funded, well-entrenched enemy. And it's going to be a long battle. So we have to come together. We should collaborate. We have to be disruptive, make the optimum use of resources, challenge the status quo, and then try to capture the existing institutions. Don't just let them be, right? So that has to be our mantra. So this slide just shows how the Overton window can be shifted. So this is basically saying that any new idea originally seems unthinkable. But if you persist, if you put up the evidence, if you make your case, gradually it becomes a desired idea. And there has been tremendous progress in the last 10 years. The things we are able to talk about openly now was just not possible 10 years back. So we should be cognizant of that, while at the same time realizing the challenge ahead. So this African proverb says, until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So we have to tell our stories, not just us, everybody in the global south. The indigenous voices have to come out, and they have to challenge the mainstream narrative. Sorry about the clicker. So now this shows that we understand media is important, and this is how World Hindu Congress basically tries to organize society around these 7 different streams: media, economy, politics, education, organizations, women, and youth. So all of these have to work together. We have to bring about change in all these spheres if we want a prosperous and a dignified life for Hindus. So all these 7 streams, that is why they are the focus of World Hindu Congress. Okay, now I'll quickly talk about the structure of the media conference. So there'll be 6 sessions. They will all follow the same pattern, 75 minutes for each session, with a session chair and 3 speakers. Unfortunately for this session, our 3rd speaker is unwell, Shri Ashok Srivastav, so he could not make it. So then we will have a session introduction by the chair for about 5 minutes. Then each speaker will speak for 10 minutes. Afterwards, we will have a panel discussion and an audience Q&A for 30-35 minutes. And then the chair will conclude the session by summarizing the discussion and the key takeaways. Oh yeah, and there'll be 2 sessions today, this one and the one following, and then 4 sessions on Saturday. Sunday is just for the concluding and the plenary session. There'll be no parallel conferences going on. So today's session is about news media, whether it's performing its dharma. Now, one of the many meanings of dharma is doing your duty, to uphold righteousness, to create a healthy samaj, individual. So this is what we will be exploring in this session, whether news media is doing its duty. Session 2 will be about policy and regulation challenges in a fast-changing technology landscape in media. So even mainstream or traditional media regulation, whether it has been successful or not is debatable. But with technology coming into the mix, with big tech social media platforms, which often do not even accept or recognize our sovereignty, and now AI also coming into the mix. So the challenges have grown, and we'll try to explore what our government is doing, what other countries are doing in this session. Session 3, which is the first session tomorrow, will be about digital media. So like I said earlier, this has really leveled the playing field. It has democratized discourse. And there's a lot of interesting path-breaking work taking place. But there are challenges as well. So we'll take a look at this critical area in the third session. Session 4 is about building an alternative narrative. So here we have brought together people who are doing some unique and very interesting work, and they are actually fundamentally challenging the status quo. So it will be about building an alternative narrative, which is at the same time the correct narrative. Session 5 will focus on entertainment media. So we know its importance, and there has been a welcome change in terms of the stories that are now coming out. But OTT is another area where we cannot afford to ignore because that's becoming very important. So we'll get into those issues in this session. Session 6 will be about the Hindu perspective in publishing and media studies. So publishing, we are trying to cover magazines, fiction, non-fiction. And the media studies will be briefly touched upon, because the way we train our journalists in the journalism colleges and mass communication courses, that determines the quality of people who get into the news field. So some of our brightest minds are being lost to this indoctrination that is going on, not just in mass communication or journalism, but all academia. So what can we do to change that? So with that, I'll conclude. And I hope you all have a very rewarding and engaging experience at the Hindu Media Conference. And I hope it inspires you to continue doing whatever you're doing in the service of Dharma. Jayasya Ayatanam Dharma, Dharma the abode of victory. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikramji, for this introduction. And now, as we all know why we are here, so let us start the session. This session is, as you all know, news media performing its Dharma. This will be chaired by, session chair for this will be Shri Anand Narasimhan. I know, he doesn't need an introduction. He also has been accompanied by Shri Anilesh Mahajan and Smt Swati Goel Sharma. Welcome. So, as you all know them very well, but still I'll have a little brief about them. Shri Anand Narasimhan is Managing Director, Special Projects, CNN News 18, a double MBA in Marketing and Finance with a diploma in Mass Communications. Anand Narasimhan is a senior broadcast journalist. After stints at ESPN, Star Sports, 10 Sports, Times Now, Anand has been with Network 18 since August 2018. As a senior anchor, he is the primetime face at CNN News 18 with the #1 show on English news at 8 p.m., The Right Stand. As managing editor, Special Projects, he is the driving force behind key network campaigns like Mission Pani, Rising India, She Shakti, and etc. Anand believes that Bharat's inclusive Hindu ethos must be protected, nourished, and further strengthened. Shri Anilesh Mahajan is an accomplished professional with over 2 decades of experience in journalism and editorial work. As a deputy editor at India Today magazine, he is deeply immersed in the world of politics and economy and closely tracking the dynamic interplay between these two crucial spheres. Smt Swati Goel Sharma is a journalist with more than 10 years of experience at media houses such as the Times of India, Hindustan Times. Currently, she is senior editor at Swarajya magazine. Besides reporting on conflict, national integration, and women trafficking, she runs a social welfare organization to help victims of atrocities. Her reportage has often resulted in national agencies such as Childware and Dalit commissions taking note, leading to the rescue of trafficking victims. Swati also runs a popular Twitter account called Gems of Bollywood. Look at that, how famous it is. Gems of Bollywood that calls out the anti-Hindu hate and obscenity in Bharat's leading film industry. May I call upon our esteemed guests to join us on the stage, please? Now I request Shri Anand Narasimhan to conduct the session, please. Thank you.
Namaste, Jai Bharat, and thank you very, very much. And it's a phenomenal honor and pleasure to be part of and amongst all of us at the World Hindu Congress. My sincere thanks to Swami Vivekanand and the entire team. Vikram ji has been very patient. Like you see, we're supposed to be 4, but we are just 3. But I have very, very august people sitting in the audience also, who we hope that we will be able to create a larger discourse via the Q&A. And we'll not just do a panel discussion, we will do a house discussion. So let's try and make it more engaging. Between the 3 of us, we are all somewhere part, or we have been part of what many term as big media in Bharat. And between the 3 of us, we have seen a lot at very close quarters. We've seen it from a distance when we are not actively part of the industry. We've been through a process of growing up, and we've had different ways of growing up and coming to where we are today. The other aspect is Swati is, in fact, is far younger than we are, at least me. So. But she's done some phenomenal work, and it gives us great pride, because there were times when you'd say, oh, can we even say what we can say? And today there are so many who are saying it so much more actively. So times they are a-changing, and we can feel the winds of change. Anilesh has been in the thick and in the den of places where for him to stand there and propagate or to even espouse what he believes is a challenge on day in and day out. And I empathize with him, because what we say, how we say, where we say is very closely watched by those who want to ensure that an intellectual discourse, a balanced, sensible discourse that presents the right perspective should be brought down. So we have different ways of looking at the subject itself. Is media performing its dharma? This is a question. Now, how would you define media? So all 3 of us are from news media, so we will try and keep this closer to news media, Gems of Bollywood aside. But we can talk about that too later when we converse. But performing its dharma from whose perspective? And how would I define dharma for media? I think some of the issues where we have a problem is, how do I define dharma? If dharyate iti dharma, that means that which sustains as dharma. Oh, Ami Ganatra is there. So she's mentioned and written about it very well. Very, very well read lady. Please listen to her in her session. Uday Mahurkarji is chair of next session, so he's here. So he's been through this over generations. And at times where they were still tougher. But narrative control is not something which is new. Narrative domination, polarizing narratives, this has happened ever since the time of Narad Muni. But the difference then is that he had his focus very clear. his ideological tentpole was Narayan, Narayan, and for the greater good of humanity. So that tentpole was never compromised by him. Has that tentpole been compromised today? What is that tentpole and for who? Now, all of us, somewhere, if you are connected to the news media business or the media business, we know that news media predominantly is a cost center. So it costs for you to stand there for your ideals. Then, so whoever controls the cost, controls the money, then influences the ideal. So then who do you blame? So if I am a salaried employee of a company, my dharma is to who? My employer, my profession, the story, or Bharat? So then, depending upon which prism we look at the story, or we look at Dharma, then the interpretation of that changes. We should also say, Duryodhana was also performing his Dharma. So was Ravana, because they believed sincerely that they had been injustice done to them and what they were doing is right. So from their point of view, their prism of understanding Dharma is different. The left is liberal, right is not. So we call them left liberal. But are we not liberal? Do you call ourselves right liberal? No, we don't. So why give them the credit of only them being liberal, us not? Who coined these terms? How do you and me define being Hindu? How should media define Hindu? From a prism of Bharat? From a prism of personal faith? From a prism of... See, all of these layers are very important to understand because there is no clarity amongst a lot of the current generation in the media about any of this. My simple point is, and we'll elaborate on it as I hand it over to Anilesh to talk about the challenges and what he wants to focus on as to how we can get more people who are oriented towards thinking in a particular way. There is a geological or a geographical definition of Bharat, which Veer Savarkar ji espoused. It's part of our Vishnu Puran, and we identify ourselves from one Sindhu to the other Sindhu. Indus to the Sindhu Nadi to the Sindhu Sagara. So this is that entire landmass which has Himalayas on the one side, water bodies on three other sides. The other one is that all of us believe in one common thought, that is the spiritual aspect. That we believe in karma phala and the continuation, the residue of your karma or your actions in this life into your next life, that is punarjanma. So all religions that were born, panths in Bharat, this is the common thread. Jainism, Buddhism, Shaivism, Vaishnava, however you would look at it. And they're all streams of this lovely, phenomenal Hindu way of life. So what is Bharat? Who are we as Bharatiya? How do we define Bharat? And how do I, you, all of us, define Bharat to the rest of the world? Do we have this clarity? Does every corporate who runs a media house have this clarity? Does every individual who's running a YouTube podcast have this clarity? When we don't have that clarity, how can we even ask this question? Are we performing our dharma? Because we don't even know what we stand for very clearly. Some of us will claim we do. A lot of us will claim their own interpretations. But overall, is there a common thread? Sutre Manigana Iva, that's how Krishna calls himself, isn't it, in the Gita? That I am the thread that you don't see in that string of necklaces. So we are all the strings, we are all the pearl. But what is that common string that binds us all? Is that present or absent in media? Is there a common thread that defines us as Bharatiya? Is that thread present in Bharatiya media? If that thread is not present, how can we even look at Samanvaya or a performance of Dharma as the fourth pillar of society? To sustain society, to build society. What society? Which Bharat are we talking about? What is your idea of Bharat, my idea of Bharat? I'm talking from a Bharatiya point of view because we're looking at is news media performing its Dharma. I will not go and stretch it to rest of the world because each place looks at it from its point of view. American media pushes American interests. British media pushes British interests. Gulf media pushes its interests. Chinese media pushes its interests. What does Bharatiya media push? So there is no, so isn't it a question to which we all know the answer, but the journey is to now reach to ensure that the answer is changed. And the answer will be changed only when the syllabus is corrected. Huh? So I'll tell you there. No, I'm not even, I'm willing to accept and concede that language media is far more oriented or rooted. But is language media directing society in the right direction too? Is language media also performing its dharma? We'll discuss that also. The issues are different. The subjects are different. The way of communication is different. And what's picked up to reflect society even in language media is different. So there also we have a problem because we don't have the common string, sir. The common string that will ideologically root us to Bharat. That's not there. And that starts with the principles of media houses, the sponsors of media shows, the anchors, presenters, writers, across our media platforms, because we are all looking at it from a prism that doesn't have a greater goal, that doesn't have a greater glass, which tells you look at it like this and then make your perceptions. That's not there. That's where I'm going to open this up and get Anilesh in. Anilesh, your point of view, and then Swati. Yeah.
Maybe we can start with Swati.
Swati, all right. Okay, Swati.
Sit and speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I must commend Swarajya for allowing her to do what she's doing, isn't it?
Oh, thank you so much.
You need them. Muthu sir, if you're there, Jaggi sir, whenever you listen to it, and Prasanna, yes.
There is a project ongoing to show Hindu nationalism. We can call it Hindutva or Hinduness or Hindu resistance or even Hindu consciousness as a fascist terror movement which is against the global ideas of peace and equality and justice. This is a strong statement, but I say this after consistently covering conflicts in Bharat for the past 5 years. I've been on the terminal ground, talked to victims, perpetrators, bystanders. I've seen the disparity on what is happening and what is being reported. And of course, I survived it all, and I'm here to talk to you about it. So to achieve this Hindutva vilification, cases where Hindus are even minor aggressors are disproportionately amplified, and cases where they're obviously victims of bigotry and deeply rooted religious bias, they are downplayed or even whitewashed. All of this may sound like you have already read it before. Of course, it has been all over social media, and a lot of awareness about it has been generated lately. But let me cite a few examples. Probably we all know about Akhlaq. Akhlaq was a resident of a Hindu majority village near Delhi. He slaughtered a cow. His neighbors saw it, and they were angry. They attacked him, and he died. So this case was in the global press and, of course, on front pages of English news media for many months. And it was projected as a case of how violent the cow protection sentiment is. Around the same time, there was another very gruesome incident, which I'm sure nobody knows. Nobody among us like you knows about it. The incident was that 3 sadhus who were resident priests at a temple in Auraiya district of Uttar Pradesh, they were killed in sleep. They were tied to their cots. Their tongues were chopped, and their throats were slit by butchers who were just living a few meters away. The sadhus had tipped off the police about their cow slaughter activities. And they did it to teach all the village a lesson. Like, if you do this, this is what we are going to do. You know, of course, this incident was not covered in the global press at all, and it was nowhere in the front media, on the front pages of the newspapers too. But you know, what really stood out in the coverage, that the sentiment of cow protection was vilified. It was, and on the other hand, the sentiment of beef or cow slaughter or treating cow as just beef was really glorified. Like, glorified in the sense was projected as a food choice. So like it was so strange that a country which was partitioned, like cow slaughter was one of the decisive factors of partition. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, famously told Time magazine in 1946, like a year before partition, that Hindus and Muslims have nothing common in between. And he said, I want to eat the cow that the Hindu worships. So, I mean, after partition, in a post-partition India, how is it that the sentiment of cow slaughter is not criticized and is projected as a food choice, and the sentiment of resistance to cow slaughter by Gorakshaks, that's vilified? You know, Scroll magazine, which is quite left-leaning, they read a headline after this incident that the first parliament attack was not carried out by Lashkar-e-Tayyaba, but by Gorakshaks. They were referring to a case where many Naga sadhus went to parliament to appeal to Indira Gandhi to impose a nationwide ban on cow slaughter. Like, imagine this was happening in a post-partition India. And tell me, like, because we were talking about news media performing its dharma, how is the sentiment to protect the animal that is giving you milk till her death inferior to the sentiment that once she stops giving meat, just kill her and eat her? Like, how is cow protection an inferior sentiment to cow slaughter? So this is where, like, it was also one of my first experiences where I saw that the facts are distorted. The centuries-old history of subjugating Hindus, natives, and humiliating them through cow slaughter was completely, like, not told. And the sentiment which must be glorified was actually being vilified. To give you another case of complete media, I mean, this fake narratives, there was a recent bout of violence in Mewat. Mewat is a Muslim-majority district in Haryana, which is overall a Hindu-majority state. So a group of processionists, a group of Hindus, entered Mewat for Jal Abhishek at a Shivling in a temple, in a very famous temple. Mewat is home to many ancient Shiv temples. Once they entered Mewat, they were pelted with stones. 4 of them died on the spot. 2 of them were home guards, and 2 of them were members of the procession. You know how media reported the incident? Violence erupted in Hindu procession after it crossed into a Muslim area. Like, note the phrases. Yeah. Violence erupted, which suggests that it was the procession participants that indulged in violence. And after crossing into the Muslim area, which suggests that the act of crossing into that area is criminal and not the stone pelting itself. This is how everybody reported it, be it BBC or Guardian or Canada's state agency or BBC. This clever use of words to hide anti-Hindu crimes first became very apparent to me when I was busting a hate crime database run by a website named India's Pen. You should know about this hate crime database if you don't, because this was an exercise done in the run-up to elections in 2019. It was used by the Congress party too to vilify BJP as a party under which atrocities against Christians and Muslims was increasing. And it was reported by all the global media, by be it New York Times or Washington Post, everybody to say through data that Muslims and Christians were there was a genocidal threat on Muslims and Christians in India by Hindus. Of course, it was a very selective database. They would actively omit cases of Hindu persecution. Okay, I wouldn't use the word, I would say cases where the Hindus were victims. But I'll give you an example of how vile, what lengths they went to. So a boy named Chandan Gupta in Kasganj district of Uttar Pradesh, he was killed by, a few lanes away from his house, he was killed by 2 men named Rahat and Salim. So this hate crime database, it reported the incident as Chandan Gupta's act of taking the motorcycle through the mohalla was projected as a hate crime. His murder was not. I called it out on social media. I posted their screenshots. And I said, how is it that you have not named murder as a hate crime, but the act of taking motorcycle into their mohalla as a hate crime? Then they changed it. In another case, they really did the unthinkable. 4 people had a scuffle in a mohalla of Delhi. And they just, without verifying any fact, they just wrote that these 4 people were victims of an anti-Muslim hate crime. When I went to the spot, I found out there was no Hindu involved in the case at all. All 4 people happened to be Muslims. When I pointed out on social media, on social media, I tagged them, I published my report, and I published all the video testimonies, FIR copies. You know what did they say? Okay, there was an error, but it doesn't change the larger picture. So this has all happened, and it continues to happen. So there are many, many examples of how anti-Hindu crimes are either whitewashed or misrepresented or completely ignored. And of course, the blatant lies and this distortion of narratives is not just in news media. Gems of Bollywood, which of course I run with Sanjeev Nevar. Sanjeev Nevar, I must mention here, is an IIM graduate, and has devoted his life to Sanskrit and Vedas. He runs his handle too. So we have systematically shown through clips how reality is changed. For example, in Gangs of Wasipur, they showed that a Muslim girl was kidnapped by a Hindu group, while on some street in Bihar, and was gang raped and then just thrown off the streets. In reality, this particular scene was based on a real scene, on a real case in Bihar, in Bihar. So in the reality, it was a Hindu girl who was kidnapped by a Muslim group. So this is how they change it. And when we asked Anurag Kashyap on social media on why did they change it, he actually went so far as to call Gems of Bollywood कि आप बस ये पैसे के लिए करते हो, आप बस पैसा चाहते हो. So basically, no answer. In a show called Quantico, American show Quantico, there is a scene in which Priyanka Chopra, who's playing an FBI agent, I think, she foils a terror attack by spotting a Rudraksh on the man. I mean, imagine, there is hardly has ever been such a case on somebody plotting an attack on foreign soil with the Rudraksh wearing. This kind of cooked it up. So, and Gems of Bollywood has shown, through a lot of clips, how such narrative is completely turned on its head. We, of course, also know that 26/11 terrorist Ajmal Kasab, he was supposed to die as a Hindu named Sameer Chaudhary. And had it not been for the great Tukaram Omble, this Hindu terror theory would have really gotten a boost. See, the question occurs, why is a Hindu terror theory being pushed and why anti-Hindu crimes are hidden? Even such heinous cases like it happened in Kanpur 7 years ago, but the killers just got a death sentence from the NIA court. A school teacher named Ramesh Shukla, he was gunned down on one afternoon while returning from school on a bicycle. So nobody could crack the case. The police said we have no leads, so they just closed down the investigation. Later, it was revealed that 3 men from Kanpur, they wanted to join ISIS. They somehow got in touch with some handlers in Syria, and they killed him. They killed Ramesh Shukla. They recorded the video and sent it on some messaging app to the killers, because to show that, see, they were so capable of killing a kafir. And how did they identify Ramesh Shukla? Because he was wearing a tilak. He was wearing a Kalava, he was wearing a dhoti, so it was easy to spot him. Such a big case, it hardly made any news. And the sentiment, that the motivation for the crime, which is like blatant kafir hate, it was nowhere in the news media. See, I feel there are several local and global factors at play as to why this trend is there in a large section of media, which is either they want to weaken the position of the Indian government at global level, which basically means, as Anand said, they are not working for India's interest, but for somebody else's interest. Or they may just be acting as fronts for terror organizations for recruitment. This is also not, this is a very much a possibility. And there are immediate consequences of such propaganda narratives. When consistently anti-Hindu crimes are not shown, and only those crimes, even minor ones, in which some person from the minority community is facing something, then that community is bound to feel insecure. They also are bound to feel vindictive. So there is a far greater chance of them joining a terror organization. And of course, the National Investigation Agency is bursting ISIS modules and Maoist modules every day. Every other day you see a press release where they have, and all this talk of, oh, India mein to koi ISIS mein nahi join kar raha hai. Aisa ye jhoot hai. If you go to their website, if you see, like so many new modules are being busted every day. Aligarh Muslim University में मिलते हैं, किसी भी, even doctors, in such professions like medicine, वहाँ के लोग आजकल पकड़े जा रहे हैं. So obviously such narratives are a cause of great concern. See, and of course, like, combating it needs sustained, coordinated efforts, and some of it is being done. But I feel that we also need to tell our own stories. That's where ground journalism matters. We need to tell our stories in a way that people take us seriously and want to hear our side of the story. For instance, I just had a tour of Bengal and Ayodhya. I wanted to talk to the Kar Sevaks families. Kar Sevaks, by the way, I don't know if you know it, but Kar Seva is a word derived from the Sikh tradition. I checked it from the VHP in Ayodhya because I had a doubt. Kar basically means hand and Seva means Seva. So it was literally Seva done through hands, which is because it started with कि आप ईंट लाइए मंदिर के लिए. So when I see throughout like all these decades, the global media and the left-leaning dominant media has projected car savers as violent communal goons. But when you actually talk to their families and know about their history and know about their lives, you learn they were really simple-hearted people with a lot of devotion in their hearts. अयोध्या में हर दूसरे तीसरे घर में आपको ऐसी कहानी मिल जाएगी कि कोई मलबे के नीचे दबकर मर गया, कोई मतलब काफ़ी सारे, किसी का हाथ टूट गया, किसी के आज तक बैक में प्रॉब्लम है. So these are stories of extreme devotion. I think we need to tell our stories in our way. We do not need to be apologetic, and we also need to do it sincerely, and we also have to take care of the sentiments, the simple sentiments of the majority. I do not mean to say that every sentiment of majority needs to be respected. अगर पाकिस्तान में ये sentiment है कि हर blasphemer को सरतन से जुदा कर दो, I do not think the media should support that majority sentiment. But this sentiment, it was really driven by, as I said, selfless devotion. It was not an unjust demand to want to have a Ram Mandir at the site, right? This is where I feel the media has failed to perform its dharma. They didn't understand the pulse of the people. In fact, they kind of worked against the people. They also worked against India's interest. So this is how I concluded that we must tell our stories in a way that resonates with the simple, acceptable sentiments of the majority. Thank you.
Well done. Well done, Swati. And we'll give you more time to talk because there are a lot of stories like these, ladies and gentlemen. Who writes those headlines? And who passes those headlines? And how did those people get to sit on those chairs where they get to decide how the lines would be read? Doesn't it prick on their consciousness? Now, this is a question that I'm challenged with day in and day out. How do you allow this to pass? The fact of the matter is, when you do a certain level of thinking from their perspective, they're conditioned to think that way. Sushil Panditji is here. If the entire 1990s exodus was blanked out of the national print media, it was blanked out. Did we even know? 32 years later, we had Vivek Ranjan Agnihotri to come and make that story, and that's when people woke up to it. So for 30 years, you had no clue? Direct Action Day, how many of us know? How do we know the genesis of that? If for Ram Janmabhoomi, Nirmohi Akhada, the sacrifices of just one Akhada, I'm not saying that other Akhadas have not sacrificed. Nirmohi Akhada, 400 to 500 of Nirmohi Akhada people over a period of 70 to 80 years sacrificed their lives just to protect Ram Chabutra and Sita Rasoi because they were sleeping there in the nights. So these are stories which we have to go back and understand. There were times when we were stopped from calling them terrorists, call them militants. I don't know how many of you have heard, but my blood boiled and I couldn't do anything when I heard, "Kya karna hai hame leke de do unko." A few years ago, this was the sentiment. Kya karna hai? We don't even need it. The same sentiment that was espoused by a tall leader who said not a blade of grass grows there. और आज इस रीजन में सारे फसाद की जड़ वो अक्साई चिन्ह है. सारे फसाद की जड़ वो अक्साई चिन्ह है. वो अक्साई चिन्ह गया और उसके बाद we are blocked out. We are locked. We cannot be a samartha rashtra because we are landlocked. Our trades are dependent on other countries via land, and we do not dominate sea trade. There is a huge geopolitical economic impact to narratives that were done. And at that time, you had Congress leaders who took off their topi and said, "Yahan pe nahi hoga raha, to isse bhi bech doge." Right? But we need that kind of a sentiment. We need that kind of awareness and understanding of where the genesis happens. And those people who are sitting there, what are their motivations? Their motivation certainly is not the interest of Bharat. I go back to that thing, that we need to have a common thread that binds all of us to Bharat. And that common thread needs to percolate into mass media. We may have, it's not driven by political leadership. No. It's not driven by politics. It's not driven by political leadership. It's driven by what does Bharat stand for you and what should the media stand for as far as Bharat is concerned. 75 years and we don't have a platform which tells our story to the world. It's a reflection on us as media. It's a reflection, big reflection. We don't have a strong, potent voice of Bharat to the world. And that's why the whole communication itself is distorted. A lot is changing. A lot is changing. But should more be done? Yes. Anilesh, over to you. Now, he's the print guy here. Please put your hands together.
नमस्कार देवी और सज्जनों. स्वाति ने मेरी हिंदी में बोलूँ तो प्रॉब्लम तो नहीं. ओके. Although my thoughts comes in English, but I'll prefer to speak in Hindi. स्वाति ने मेरा काम जो है वो काफ़ी आसान कर दिया है. She has given a ground situation और जो इस वक्त धरातल पे हो रहा है उसको काफ़ी हद तक सामने ले आई है. और आई रियली थैंकफुल स्वाति. अब नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन आता है जिसका टॉपिक मुझे भी दिया गया है कि हिंदू वॉइसेस को आज के कन्वेंशनल मीडिया में, मैं भी एक कन्वेंशनल मीडिया का हिस्सा हूँ, उसमें कैसे उसको बढ़ाया जाए. बढ़ाने का मतलब ये है कि जो स्वाति ने सिचुएशन बताई है कि हिंदू वॉइसेस जो है कन्वेंशनल मीडिया में कम है, ये एक एक्सेप्टेड फैक्ट है और इस चीज़ को हम सब रियलाइज़ भी करते हैं. और अब उस सिचुएशन से निकला कैसे जाए. एक तो जैसे आनंद भी बता रहे थे, एक तो ये है कि हमारी जो स्टोरीज़ हैं उन स्टोरीज़ को हमें बार बार दोबारा अलग अलग प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे बोलना पड़ेगा, समझाना पड़ेगा. अगर हम भारत के इतिहास को थोड़ा सा समझने की कोशिश करें, जो मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री है, इसको मैं 3 हिस्सों में बांटता हूँ. 1947 से लेके 1977 तक, जब तक कांग्रेस ने रूल किया डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली, एक ही परिवार ने रूल किया. 77 से लेके 2014 तक, जब एक मिली जुली सरकारों का भारत में चलन रहा, पॉलिटिकल डिस्कोर्स में एक मिला जुला सा असर रहा, तो उसमें हमने बहुत सारी रीजनल पार्टीज़ को उभरते हुए देखा जो एक कास्ट बेस्ड सिनेरियोस को लेकर चलते थे. और वहाँ पे एक अलग तरीके का जो सेकुलरिज्म हमें पढ़ाया गया, उसकी उनको ज़रूरत थी. और मीडिया ने चाहे और अनचाहे उस सेकुलरिज्म को बढ़ाने के लिए एक अलग नैरेटिव जो है उसको बुनने की कोशिश करी. हमारे सामने उदय माहुरकर हैं जिन्होंने आई विल ब्रीफली रीडू माय स्टफ दैट आई डिवाइड इंडियाज हिस्ट्री इनटू 3 segments. One is from 1947 to 77, when only one family tried to rule this country, and there was a narrative set according to their whims and fancies. From 77 to 2014, when country faced a mixed party rule, where there was a surge of several caste-based organizations, caste-based political parties, and they required a certain community's support base to win elections. And to get that thing done, they required a certain type of secularism to be inculcated. We have seen that how militancy in Punjab was reported. We have also seen how exodus of Kashmiri Pandit was reported. And it was part of the same discourse that they wanted to showcase a certain type of secularism and certain type of accumulation of the community. From 2014 onwards, country has seen a surge in a particular discourse. I'm not going for any political party's dispensation, but this is reflection of, there is an upsurge in a Hindu sentiment, an upsurge in a common man's sentiment that he's been left out, and his stories are not being told. Now, since we are talking about that how Hindu voices needs to come forward and what sort of experiences conventional media goes through. See, as a proud Hindu, as a proud Bharatiya, I tried to bring in, Bharat First ideology, which I have learned from Uday Mahorkar. He was my senior at India Today, and he never relented to speak about his thought process, and he has proudly written many of the articles which are inspiration to many of us. Yeah. See, I took my platform to expose how conversion is happening in Punjab, how Sikhs, who are warrior community, they have been converted into a crude form of Christianity. There is a deliberate attempt which is happening in Punjab, where a large section of community is being taken away from the Hindu fold, and it has been deliberately taken out. Because we all know the history that Sikhs, that the Panth was formed to defend the Hindu faith, and now there is a full-fledged conspiracy which is going on in that state, where Sikhs are being taken out of the Hindu fold. So I used my platform. I reported on the changes which are happening in that society. So in a way, I brought this story. But there has to be more such stories which need to come on the conventional platforms. And that can't be brought to fore by journalists alone. There has to be an ecosystem where we can use those instances, those researches, those new form of storytelling to reinstate and restart the conversations, to bring those stories forward. See, I have written the story. Now what should I do? Can I go back and write again about it? For that, professionally, I require a trigger. So trigger can be brought by the ecosystem. And that ecosystem requires to be stationed at every nook and corner of this country. See, we are going through a war with the leftist ideology, a war with the Naxalites, war with the so-called liberals. I don't call them liberals, but so-called liberals. And then there is a Western interest also in our country, which don't want, upsurge into the Bharat sentiment and the sentiment of Hindus, us Hindus. And globally, we have shown to the world that, we have an ethos and we can add values to any geography where we go. And that, creates problem for them. And this is actually being faced by us, that there is an ecosystem which has been created and cooperated by many of these elements, which hinders when we try to build up a story. That here is a story, like many of the stories which Swati say, I also know. Yeah. My media organization has also reported, and reported on a very positive note, because many of the journalists, they also see the things. But problem comes that these stories are not repeated many times. But leftists and those liberal ideologues, they have ecosystem. And they have created that ecosystem for last 75 years in India. And they use historians, so-called intellectuals. They used small organizations to reinstate those stories. We also have to build, or Hindu organizations also have to build those ecosystems, those research organizations, those historians, build credibility to them. We are already into the second regime of Prime Minister Modi. But I am sorry to say that, that ecosystem is still wanted. There have been stories which have been told by Uday Bhai about Veer Savarkar, and Vikram Sampath also wrote book about Veer Savarkar. Thankfully, because of these intellectuals, Veer Savarkar is in the center of discussion. We now know that what sort of sacrifices that human being made to make this country great. And still, we find it very difficult to position those stories in many of the conventional media houses. But there are more stories to be told. There has to be story told that why Muhammad Ghazni couldn't attack for the 18th time. How Gauri was resisted by many of the Naga sadhus in this world. Many of these stories need to be told by historians. Then only journalists like us can go and talk more about it. So my small interjection here is that ecosystem which is lacking, not only about many of these instances, but there is also an ecosystem which is impeding about creation of a workforce which is sympathetic to our course. How many media schools have professors who are sympathetic to our course? Then, leftist media has, or leftist organizations have scholarship programs which they give to the young journalists. How many of us, have that access? Most of the knowledge which we gain is from our colleagues. I mentioned Uday Maharkar deliberately because I wanted to give example that from time to time he used to guide me that, what is the Hindu principle? What is the Bharat principle? Why we should keep Bharat first? But how many of us have access to Uday Maharkar, right? There has to be more institutions like Uday Maharkar. There has to be an institutional positioning where, many of the journalists who want to write about Bharat, who want to write about Hindu principle need to be taught that, okay, these are the principles. Like many of the things which Anand was mentioning, that what is Hindu principle? That principle needs to be told, retold, and reinforced into journalist's mind. Then only he can go back to his newsroom, discuss stories, bring those principles in. See, there is a battle. Many of our colleagues are also liberals and leftists. But when we are into newsroom, our newsrooms largely are democratic. But we also need to have that much of knowledge to speak and to take our agenda forward. We can't be positioned that, this guy is only talking about a certain values without any empirical evidences. And I'm really sorry to say that in many of the cases, empirical evidences are lacking. We have to create institutions where empirical evidences need to be created, need to be presented, need to be positioned, and those empirical evidences can be reflected into conventional media. Sorry to sound little apologetic, but more work has to be done to create those ecosystems. Plus, there is a need of more credible voices where we all can go and talk and use those voices into our stories. You use those experiences into our stories. Right now, in current scenario, these numbers are increasing. So that's why I was giving 2014 example, that now people are also sympathetic and people are also talking out. People are also making those points like, the great work Swati is doing, like Gems of Bollywood. Now at least we have a topic to discuss. Now at least we have some evidence to showcase that, okay, Gems of Bollywood has, done this. Mr. Anurag Kashyap, please speak on this. Right, Swati? Yes. Now at least because of her work, we have some evidences, some thing to speak about. So that needs to be inculcated, and that requires investments, that requires political will, that requires a commitment to the cause, and that can't be done by individuals. Swati is doing this work with her friends, but these narrative have to be built, and our stories need to be told. I want to give one example before I stop and I pass on my mic to Anand to conduct the conversation further. See, how many of us know that Bhagat Singh was not a communist? In last 80 years, 90 years, there has been conversation that during his jail term he was converted into communism because he was influenced by Lenin. But this is a selective storytelling, and selective storytelling because Bhagat Singh was not only reading one book, but he was reading 5 books. He was reading about Veer Savarkar's work. He was reading Maharana Pratap's Jeevani. He was reading Heer Ranja's story, and one of the book was Lenin's, Lenin's how Lenin led this Russian Revolution. See, we also have to understand that at that time, Lenin was a hero of all those anti-imperialist forces who wanted to set their country free from the imperialists. Even I read Marx, I read Lenin. That doesn't make me Marxist or Leninist. But leftist media used one article called "Why I Am an Atheist," which was published 4 years after his death. We all have manuscripts of all the Bhagat Singh works except this article. But this article is published at every birth anniversary of Bhagat Singh and as his martyrdom day. And this is being cited by leftist ideologues, historians, and certain people who have written books on the freedom struggle of this country. Why I am giving this as an example, that how a lie is presented as a truth, and thanks to the ecosystem which these guys have created, the historians, the intellectuals, and those researchers which start taking and start making these references. In 2002, I used one of the RSS publications to write. I was a student at Punjab University in Chandigarh, and as a student, I used RSS publication to cite many of the examples that Bhagat Singh was actually an Arya Samaji, and he used Arya Samaj's mandirs to hide. His family was a Arya Samaji Sikh family. Then, I searched and I went to Lahore to read many of the papers. I went to London also to read many of the papers, but I could not find manuscript of this article. And when I started talking to many of the Arya Samajis, because I wanted to locate, I'll take just 1 minute to conclude, to locate, because I could find all the papers, all the letters which Bhagat Singh has written in jail, except this one. Then I laid my hand on the letter which he wrote to his brother. He was telling him that, how he should behave, how he should, conduct, and how he should take care of his parents, and what is his moral responsibility as. So he then, in concluding para, he was saying that, he also wanted to do seva of his mother and father, but he chose this path. And last line, what he wrote, I'll use the Punjabi phrase that "Baki jo Rab nu manzoor." The guy who was writing "Why I Am an Atheist," in his last letter, last line, which is available, he's saying that "Baki jo Rab nu manzoor," it nullifies it. But how many of us, how many intellectuals who claim that, they want to take up the Hindu cause, or they can't want to...
saying who wrote the article?
Which one?
Who wrote that article? Why am I an atheist? What's the genesis of that article?
See, this article was published in a Tamil propaganda magazine, which was published under the atheist of Periyar.
E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar. So.
And the article which we read now is a Tamil translation from Tamil. It was translated first into English and then also into Punjabi, which was mother tongue of Bhagat Singh. But Bhagat Singh wrote in 3 languages, Urdu, Punjabi, and in Hindi. And he emphasized that why Hindi should be the, a thread which should take every Indian together. But all these things are missing. All these things are missing because the ecosystem is missing. Sorry?
Yeah.
Baki jo Rab nu manzoor.
Baki jo Rab nu
That
manzoor.
means that whatever, God destines,
Rest, whatever God wills. Or,
God wills,
or
yeah. It's
Bhagwan
up to the
decides,
God's
yeah.
will. Yeah. Sorry. I still believe that I am in Delhi and speaking to more a Hindi audience. Sorry. So See, the Bhagat Singh is considered as a communist comrade only because ecosystem is missing. And there was a deliberate attempt to paint Bhagat Singh as a communist because in 70s and 80s, that dispensation required a communist face in Punjab, where there was a plot to divide the Punjabi community, and they used Bhagat Singh. But unfortunately, we are still, falling into that prey. And these many stories need to come forth. Uday Bhai has done Veer Savarkar, Vikram has done Veer Savarkar, and we all are debating. Now, maybe the chance is there to, liberate Bhagat Singh out of the clutches of communists.
You've got the idea for your next cover. So after the pastors of Punjab, it is Bhagat Singh Arya Samaji. Baki jo Rabnu Manzoor should be the cover story with Bhagat Singh there.
Anand, to your happiness and pleasure, I can tell you that I have been writing about this, but because the ecosystem is missing, my articles are not getting that much of resonance.
All right.
So if you Google Bhagat Singh, Arya Samaj, Anilesh Mahajan, you'll find at least 6 articles of mine.
So reinforcement, what you talked about, we have to. And you should use the cover of India Today along with the covers of a few others to come back and say that Bhagat Singh was an Arya Samaji and he was not an atheist.
Yeah, actually,
prove that, yeah. Huh? Yeah.
See, I am writing those articles, but my sincere request to all of you sitting in this room is become my ecosystem. At least make more noises about it. We need to liberate Bhagat Singh out of this communist clutches. So thank you very much. Thanks. And Mike is back to Anand.
Put your hands together for Anilesh Mahajan. Anilesh says we need to have an ecosystem and we also need to have an ecosystem. So one that amplifies and the other one that also backs and surrounds. So both ways we need to work together on this, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of points that have been discussed and that have been spoken about, from the one common thread aspect to the aspect of trying to keep our stories simple, sincere, and factual. That's very important. The other way, one of the other things, and I'm going to throw it open, we've got about 20 minutes now. We go till about 15 minutes, till 3:50. Okay. 350, yeah, so 350, 15. So what we'll do is we'll not do the panel discussion, we'll just open it up to questions and suggestions. And one of the things which, I'm going to throw it out and get your thoughts and then we can connect together. 1 minute, sir. Is also by saying, yes sir, one by one, I'll come to you. By saying, I love myself and I hate you are two different ways of looking at the same aspect, the same story. Sometimes we are so obsessed by telling the other, you are ugly and you are bad and I hate you, that we forget to stand up and say, look at me, I'm good, I'm beautiful, this is who I am. Come join me. So there is a way of saying the same story and putting it out there and then telling people, this is who I am. So perhaps that's also one of the aspects that media needs to do if it needs to perform its dharma. Largely the sentiment right now, I can understand. The answer is NO, and we've got to move to YES, and so we'll do that. Now we'll open it up to questions. One by one, please. Okay. The gentleman there has already got the mic, sir, so we'll have to start with him. And please be democratic.
We were talking about ecosystem.
Yeah.
There is an organization called SMART, which has got 200 plus members, media members.
Sir, we can't see you.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's an organization.
Sir, please introduce yourself. It will be very kind of.
I'm J.K. Jhavar from Chennai. I'm founder of SMART. So this organization has 200 SMART members, media members, and about 100 knowledge members. And the idea is to create in every district a media, which is what he was talking about, having an ecosystem. So if there could be a collaborative efforts between the mainstream media and this SMART, then a lot of your research, which you cannot publish there, can be routed through this SMART.
True, sir. So it's a very smart idea and a great suggestion. We will take that up. Also, there are entities in Tamil Nadu itself who are doing a lot of work, who need a certain level of support, and I'm sure some of them are around. and we should all connect and we
so
should
I
have a
would
chat.
also like
Yeah.
to place one more issue.
Yes, please.
Smart has been trying to get advertisement because all media runs on advertisement. And so we thought the overall readership of Smart members is 200 million plus. So, which is 200 million plus is quite a big, reach out. But it is very difficult for digital media. And this is a digital media where advertisement money is paid based on the viewership. It is
Correct.
not TV
Sir,
media.
sir,
So that's another issue
you're preaching to the converted already, because we are all part of the same. We are all on the same boat where we are all cost centers, and we all need to have more people who need to back. So I would recommend, please represent all of us and get into the economics conference and ask the people there,
Exactly.
the money,
Yeah.
the money bags to back us openly. But thank you, sir.
Your media can talk in the TV panels that why the advertisement doesn't go to the
Sir,
media.
we are first talking about ourselves, why the ads don't come to us. So like I said, there has to be an ecosystem which backs this, and that includes corporates, monies, who are okay to talk and back those platforms or those entities which are very seriously focused on Bharat and its Hindu ethos. And I think that's very important. Yes, sir.
I think this Bhagat Singh
Acha,
story is...
iske baad, 1 minute, sir. Iske baad we will move to that side of the alley. Okay,
definitely.
please.
Yeah,
Haan,
yeah.
ji.
So,
Your name, please.
Shyam Tiwari. I'm a VP Publications for VHP of America, managing editor of the Hindu Issue magazine, USA. So this is going to be a great story, actually, what you just said about Bhagat Singh. So Bhagat Singh was a communist or something like, because the last movie which we saw, he was shown as a reading, some communist magazine or book by Lenin or something. So he was projected in that way as a leftist person. So this would be a great story. If you write it, please do send to us, and we'll make sure it
It's
gets
all there on his website.
Okay?
See, it's all there. Maybe after this discussion, in person, I'll share the link.
Definitely.
And also refer to Uday Bhai's book on Veer Savarkar. He has given reference to that piece also.
Yeah.
Uday Bhai's book on Veer Savarkar. So the references are also there.
Yeah, so sir, royalties here. Sir, royalties here.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Can I?
Sridhar Damle from Chicago.
Okay. Sridhar ji, namaste.
Namaste ji.
Said that it's a very good and effective habit of...
Oh, Dr. Elst.
Yes.
Dr. Elst is speaking. Sridhar ji after Dr. Elst.
So that the left has a very effective habit of setting up scholarship and study groups and everything, so that they are far better prepared for the intellectual battle. Now, are you implying, or maybe any of the other panelists, that the, let's say, right is failing in this, or even worse, that it is not even trying in this? And this counts both for the many decades of opposition, but also and especially for the last decade.
Dr. Koenraad Elst, I don't think he deserves and needs any introduction, but he's the one who's been battling this entire Aryan invasion theory for more than 30 years. He's run many books, a phenomenal person himself. Please read his books to understand the entire civilization narrative. Dr. Elst, more than us, sir, you are better placed to answer this very question that you have posted because you would know it much better. So why don't you tell us, is the right really creating an ecosystem, or is it still holding on to its purses? Why don't you only tell us, sir?
Well, my opinion about this is well known. So I see what we really all like to know is what people, from the field.
Sir, we'll only echo your sentiments, sir. Okay.
Are better placed for this.
No, so I personally echo your sentiment, but yeah.
Professor Saab, very good evening. The thing is that situation is not that great, but there is a positive light that situation is improving. So we may not say that there is a zero ecosystem. There are responsibilities which are being taken by our seniors. They are establishing not only literary work, but certain professors, they have also started taking up some of the researches to do empirical studies. But this is a very nascent stage, and if you trust me, this is work of just last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Like I was repeatedly making references of Uday Bhai's book on Veer Savarkar. This is part of the great work which many of our seniors are doing, and we are using his work to make references into, to take the discussion forward and make Veer Savarkar more relevant.
One thing, Anilesh.
But this is very small, there has to be multiple Uday Maharkars, living in multiple cities of this country.
No, there are the likes of Vikram Sampath. There is the likes of Jai Sai Deepak. There are others who have been doing this, and this ecosystem is growing. Plenty of authors. Amish is writing. Anand Ranganathan is writing. Ami Ganatra is writing. So many of them are writing. Bharti ji is writing. So there is this entire group which has now published a whole line of stories that actually correct our perception of Itihasa. Now, a book called Arya, the Superwomen or the Women of Bharat. It's a beautiful book. It's small, 10 stories which talk about ladies, women who, from our thing, who we don't talk about. It talks about Gargi. It talks about Subhadra. It talks about Chitrangada and their stories. And we don't even know these stories and how valiant these women were, how well-read these women were. So this system is building up, sir. So we've moved from 0 to 10 paisa. But do we need to move to 100,000? Yes, that journey has to happen. Because unless there is funding for research, unless there is openly backing such work, then that is not going to resonate. It'll somewhere then translate into mainstream media. That's the answer. Udayji, coming to you after Sridharji. Sridharji's question was not complete. Yes, Sridharji.
Yeah. So the major problem is setting the narration, giving the example. Nowadays, there is a method in madness to associate Hinduism is good, Hindutva is bad. And they want to associate Hinduism and Hindutva with Judaism and Genoist ideology. So these are the very, very articulate narration setting going on in everywhere, number one. And many times we go with detailed history rather than the pinpoint what we are. That is one of the things I would like to suggest. Even my co-author, Dr. Anderson, he asked me the same question about this thing, Number two, manipulation. If we go by the media rating, highest rating got Ravish Kumar in the 85 lakhs subscriber. We have to do the research. Who are the paid subscriber? So best thing to attack them, find their weakness. Thank you.
Well, point well made. Swati, why don't you take that? So one of the things is, this time around, when this entire Hindutva issue was set up, the kind of counter that came through, that Twa is ness, Hindu-ness, so anything of being, a state of being itself, and that counter happened across platforms. And it was countered. And that's why they moved away from Hindutva and started bashing Sanatan. So then they started, let's go the Sanatan route because this is not working. Dismantling global Hindutva, there was a coordinated effort to try and take on the likes of Audrey Troshka. Yes, they will also get voice because it's democratic. These are platforms. No, they will do it, sir. Everything. So this is a civilizational battle, and they will pick out narratives and holes at every level, and then they'll try and counter there. Point is, are we informed enough, and are we collaborated and concerted together enough, combined together and combining forces to be able to counter that narrative with information? What is important is to counter narratives with information, not with just rhetoric. That point, I think, in the Hindutva fight, it happened, and that itself signals a change. But Swati, yeah.
I'll just make a quick point. Sir, I think a lot has changed. Even an event like World Hindu Conference wouldn't see participation of so many, professionals or, so many people. They would actually, there was a time, not too long ago, like 10 years ago, they would stay away from anything with the name Hindu in it. The India Spend tracker I was talking about, by my consistent efforts, they pulled it down. And Nupur of Op India is sitting here, Nupur Sharma.
Yeah, she's here.
She made BBC pull down its articles, make changes in it. so much has happened. So now they say Hinduism is good, Hindutva is bad. There was a time when they never said Hinduism is good. Now, of course, there is also a counter thing that says we have to obliterate Hinduism also. But sir, a lot is changing. They're also kind of being pushed to a corner. We have to also acknowledge
Channels would never put the word Hindu on their top bands. Papers would never write the word Hindu on their mastheads.
They would identify the victim with the caste, but they would identify if the person is Muslim, they will just say minority or Muslim or Christian
or just
Dalit,
say one individual.
Or Dalit, but
one
they will
person,
never say Hindu.
Yeah, so all of that is changing. Now they're saying if you're going to call that person's religious identity, then call this person's religious identity. Otherwise, steer clear of calling either's religious identity. So that is happening. Yes, Udayji, you wanted to say something? Sushilji, namaste.
I think I just request everyone to keep their questions short. We just have time for maybe 2 more questions, then we have to wrap up the session.
Okay, so one question from here and one from here. Yeah. Anybody? Mike, Vikram ke haath mein, Vikram decides.
My question is very simple. How much role Christian missionary schools have played in this anti-Hindu ecosystem? Many of us till recently, much less now, who followed the nationalist thought, but put their children in missionary schools, just because they wanted their children to learn good English. So how much role missionary schools have played? Say, take St. Xavier's. A few years ago, my daughter in college, she went to St. Xavier's school, not in school, but in college. Her friend came to stay with us to spend a day. So I told her who was St. Xavier's and what was his history, you know. She went and told the teacher, you know, there. And the teacher started targeting my daughter there, you know. Christian teacher, obviously. So how much this ecosystem has been affected, or, you know, how much role the Christian missionary schools have played in this?
Can I please just say something?
This question is for both of them.
Please.
No. I mean, I'll just say something. I also studied in a convent school in Ghaziabad and come
You're
from
an exception.
No, so did I.
I come from a lower middle class family, Hindu family.
Did I.
No, I just say, I used to come home and say, ki, Mummy, ye kya vrat karti rehti ho? I used to find the dress worn by nuns in the school modern and the sari worn by my mother regressive, and English. See, but I would say English, because the Christian schools operate in English, that is an aspirational language, and that became everything aspirational in colleges. You have to understand that Hindus send their kids to Christian school. They do not send them to Islamic schools, even though they are also operating, you know, in with modern facilities, because that language, that culture is still not aspirational for the society. English is. I think that is the biggest factor. But I may also say, it's a joke here, till 12th, I studied their books, but I didn't understand much of it because it was all in English, and I didn't understand much of it later. I think it was only after college that I began reading, you know, began doing my own reading, that I actually picked up stuff. So I personally feel that in reality, in a lot of tier 2 towns, whatever they are teaching is not really having much effect.
See, no, not just that. See, a Christian mission. No, one minute. We'll answer.
I would say Anand and Swati, they are exceptions. Because I have seen it happening on a very large scale.
So I'll tell you what is happening. A lot of the missionary schools quasi or softly push a certain level of embracing Christianity. So the idea is, you may not become Christian, but you'll never have a problem with the Christian or Christianity. So you will celebrate everything, you will celebrate every festival, but at the end of the day, you will feel, oh, there is nothing challenging about this religion. This is the most lovable religion. So Amar Akbar Anthony Gonzalez is the lovable character. He's a ruffian, but he's lovable. The padri takes care of an orphan, and that narrative setting is what is happening in the Christian missionary schools. But sir, beyond those missionary schools, my point is, if those missionary schools could give the kind of education that the society was aspiring for, why didn't the Hindu educational institutions do the same? That's the question. And the second question, sir, is, the issue is not the missionary school, it's also the curriculum and the textbooks. Because if you had Bhagavad Gita as an integral part of the textbook, then the missionary school would have also had to teach it as far as CBSE is concerned. You would have had to teach it. Had you got our history right in the thing, and you would not compress 700 years of this one, and known historians today sitting, those people who designed our textbooks are saying Yudhishthir was influenced by Ashoka and Gautam Buddha. Those people wrote our textbooks, sir. So if they wrote our textbooks, our history was also walloped. So point is, yes, they had good teachers. Those teachers, I still remember my teachers. Why? They taught us well. Now, they may have an inclination, they had the right to, as per the law, in Christian missionary schools to try and talk about Christianity. Why didn't we work towards our legal systems and to ensure empowering our Hindu Hindu educational institutions to teach in English? They could have taught the Vedas in English, then nobody stopped them. They could have taught the Bhagavad Gita at that time, nobody stopped. Ancient sciences could have been taught. They could have taught Charaka Samhita and medical history from there. No. But we had, between 2014 and 2019, an educational minister who after 4 years came out and said, मैंने एक पन्ना, एक शब्द भी change नहीं किया. Press conference में बैठ के बोला है. तो अब मैं किसको बोलूं? क्रिश्चियन मिशनरी को दोष दूं कि जिसको वोट दिया उसको दोष दूं?
Anand ji, I think we have to conclude here. I think we are running out of time. Sorry. We have to also organize for the coming session.
Sorry.
So I would request if you could wrap it up.
Thank you very, very much. I think quickly going through the actionable points before everybody gets up. 30 seconds is what I'll take. Build smarter platforms that continuously push for bigger stories. Repeated reinforcement of stories. Keep at it. Be relentless. More importantly, simple, sincere, factual. Tell your side of the story rather than trying to counter or kill the other person. So that actually works. Pride, not arrogance. And finally, let's all work together to be each other's ecosystem and ecosystem. Thank you. Namaste. Jai Bharat.